So, in my infinite planning of podcast topics, I came across this one because Skip and I have very different backgrounds. I think I thought of this one while we were in a client demo or something.
Yeah.
And we're constantly repeating Skip is from MSPs,
Mhm.
Adam is from the corporate world. Now, I did do some small stints within MSPs or technology companies. Like when I started off in technology, I worked for a small PC repair shop. So this episode of Humanized IT is focused on MSP culture, managed service provider culture.
Yeah.
So most of you out there listening to this are managed service providers, and you kind of get how this evolved. But for me, it's a new thing. For me, like this is the last 5 years of my life, but I've been in tech for 20 some years. Now for Skip, this is his entire career.
Well, not quite. So,
With a couple stints in
I
other things.
do.
So he's like the reverse of me. And so I thought it'd be fun to have an episode where we talked about the real differences between corporate culture and MSP culture and kind of how we got to where we are today. So let's start off with Skip. Tell us a little bit about like your evolution in the MSP world.
Yeah.
Or
So,
how you see the MSP world having evolved from the PC repair shop to the managed service provider and now the digital maturity group or whatever it's called.
yep. Well, I do feel I have an interesting perspective, I'm very appreciative of this journey that I've been on, because I did start in the very small, literally a mom and pop PC repair place. And so, that was my introduction to technology. And then over the years, I didn't change jobs very often. I tend to, stick around a while. But when I did change, I kind of went to the other end of the spectrum. So, I would go from the small shop to, a local government, with 600 employees. And then, back and forth. I've spent my time in corporate America. But I see that we talk about, engineers and, and techie guys. And I think there is a very common thread amongst all of them. But the culture, I am kind of excited about this podcast, because the culture in MSPs is exciting. It's stressful in some ways, but I like the variety and the what I think is a little bit more cutting edge sort of environment that you find with MSPs, because it really would feed my techie side. It would really energize what I do. And as a hiring manager at an MSP, or not hiring manager, responsible for hiring, I felt like I was battling some of the great things that you get in a corporate environment. But at the same time, I'm battling it with the great things that I could offer in our MSP culture. So,
Yeah, I know like with the corporate culture, like I really missed, the idea with like PC repair, you fix a job and you move on to the next thing.
mhm,
Whereas with corporate, you're working the same job every day. And it gets kind of dull sometimes. I mean, yeah, you get to make some beautiful tapestries. And
uh-huh,
but then you get to
yep,
live with those tapestries and stare at them every day.
yeah,
And
yep, that's true.
and the monotony kind of gets to you.
The
So I'm all about
monotony,
like the strategy. I want to come up with something new. I want to come up with something interesting. I want to be handed a black box and say, here's your problem, go solve it.
yes,
And having at the end of the day, sitting back and looking at thus I have created,
yes,
and that feeling of accomplishment. But in the corporate world, it's still break fix. You still have like the same things, but it's much more nuanced. It's more stable. It's a
yes,
little bit
more so,
boring. Whereas in MSP world, you've got 100 clients under you, and you're looking at, okay, what's going to happen today?
yes. Yeah, and that there is a very exciting element. Well, and that is one of the things that would draw a lot of very talented technical people to our organization. And we had several people come to work for us. I mean, we were we're not this big corporate entity, and we just simply had limited funds to work with. So our salaries weren't that big corporate price tag, but we had people quit corporate jobs to come work for us because the work was more exciting.
It's
And
interesting.
It is, so here's a little bit of a practical example. Back in the early 2000s, Microsoft Exchange kind of ruled the email. It does in some aspects now, but it was all on premise, right? So it's all a server sitting there in a private data center, and we would have really smart engineers that would manage that in the corporate world. And when it came time to upgrade to the next version of Exchange, it would be this I don't know, extremely stressful. There's a corporate example of stress because you've got, hundreds or maybe thousands of people that are dependent on the system, and you've got a tiny window to do it. Everyone's looking at you, and you've never done this particular Exchange migration before. You did the last one, but that's a different version.
Yeah,
And
that was 8 years ago.
oh yeah, it was, and so it could be very difficult because you're really plowing new ground there. But in the MSP world, we might do half a dozen email migrations or Exchange upgrades in a month. And so we had this volume experience, and we had so many guys coming over to us because I want to do that. I want to learn new things. And then
Yes.
after I learn that new thing, I want to learn another new thing. And that rate of learning was really attractive. And if you like learning new things, if you like digging in, if you're good at, hey, give me a box and I'll figure it out,
Yeah.
an MSP is a great place for you to go because it is very peer based. I mean, job titles and pay scales and all that doesn't really matter. You have a bunch of techie guys working on MSP, and they quickly build their own totem pole. They know who the alpha geeks are really quick, and you find your place, and then you start working up. And that's the goal is, I want to work up. I want to be the guy who knows all of this stuff. And there's a real internal drive that begins to develop in some of these really good engineers to learn, to understand, to troubleshoot. And so it's an exciting community. I would say, if I were back to my technical days, the corporate jets are amazing. I just have to say, when someone asks you what time your flight leaves and you get to say, whenever I get there, that is a beautiful benefit. And corporate America can provide that. Your small MSP, in your hometown, probably not going to do that. But if I were given the choice, I would go back to the MSP culture because it is exciting. There's something new to learn every day.
Yeah, and in the corporate culture, it's more of listening to you talk. It's more of entrenchment. It
Mm-hmm.
maybe is the right word there. Or you talk about totem pole, 'cause I talk about how tribal that corporate
Oh, that's
environments
true. That's
are,
true. Yeah. Yes. That
and
very much a
because
tribe. Yes.
it's all about the tribal knowledge.
Mhm.
Is the history of this entire server, I know it. I know it by heart.
Uh-huh.
I know exactly who's gonna touch the server. I know where it's been. I can tell you, where it's been shut down.
There's a
I
screw
know.
missing on the motherboard. I lost it in the back of the rack.
Yep,
I know
that
that
was my
server.
screw. The tribal knowledge there is insane. And
Yeah.
that's where I tell people when you start a new job in corporate IT, you will learn the most in that first 6 to 12 months. And
Hmm.
then you will plateau
Yes.
because there'll be
Yeah.
less to learn. The only time you get to learn something new in a corporate environment is when you get to work with new technology, which doesn't happen really
It
often.
doesn't. Yeah.
Whereas, when I was moonlighting, that's how I got most of my experience back early on in the early 2000s. I got most of my experience once I plateaued at my state job. I got most of my experience moonlighting for small businesses and solving problems that just had me sleepless at night and had me pushing the boundaries of what I could do and how to figure things out, sitting in a room by myself, trying to figure this stuff out because there was no one to call. You back then you could call Microsoft tech support and you paid $250 for a call,
Yep.
and
Recall.
they
Yep.
would help you through whatever problem you had.
Mm.
And I pulled out my credit card a couple times to solve problems because I was beyond where I knew how
Mm-hmm.
to do things in the corporate world. And that's how I learned the most. Now, the corporate job, don't get me wrong, I had some good mentors there. But in the corporate world in the early 2000s, they didn't know what they were doing either. We were all sort of working together
Yeah.
in this little
Yep.
mixing pot of people who used to be admins, people who used to be, analysts in another division, and now we're all trying to figure out IT together.
Yeah.
So, but
Well,
brilliant people.
there's an
But
interesting.
you're dealing with things like that's how you get a corporate employee will have this nuanced understanding of a system, but it's only that system.
Yeah.
Like if they have been working with Cisco, they're going to know Cisco extremely well,
Yes. Yes.
but
Yep.
they won't know anything else. They won't
Yep.
know HP. They won't know Brocade. They won't know FortiGate. They won't know Barracuda. They will just know Cisco. And so they're
Mm-hmm.
siloed. And then
Very, very
over
much. Yeah. The
time, they
silos
know
are.
their system and how they interconnect. So they don't know other architectures. They could figure it out. They're very smart people, but they've been working with this one system and on this one ship for so long. They can tell you where everything is, but you put them on a new ship and now they're a little bit lost. It's going to take them a little while to figure it out.
Yeah. And those silos, there's probably a lot of business commentary out there, but I think those silos are really dangerous in
They are.
corporate worlds. So I worked, again, my corporate time was a pretty large company. I think globally we were about 2,500 employees. So, not a small shop. But at the tail end there, we got bought by a huge company. It was over 35,000 employees, I think. And so the transition to that was just, it was shocking, the silos, the people who would work doing one thing and had no idea what else was going on. And, I think part of it was just timing for me, in life professionally. I was maturing a bit and, just understanding how business worked. And that there was this time somewhere around there where this light really came on, where I began to understand, hey, technology is cool, but if we don't really help the business, if we don't, do something that's valuable for the business, technology loses its importance, it loses its value. And so the corporate world can create challenges with that. You do get very siloed and you get that one company mentality. So my time in corporate was oil and gas. Right. So I learned for me, once I kind of overcome some of the newness of the technology, for me to branch out, it was to learn, how does the business work? And I did. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed understanding really how these guys are, finding and producing and transporting oil and gas. And it was great. But even that for me, maybe it's just short attention spans, but that kind of grew, tiresome as well. I got maybe bored with that. And so anyway, a long tangent there to kind of say the MSP world has this variety where you get to interface with so many different organizations. So I'm moving to the MSP world, and all of a sudden I'm understanding what's it take for a doctor's office to run. I've sat through many intensive bank audits. And then manufacturing. We had another client we was working with, fairly high-end dental manufacturing sort of company. They have all these sort of implants and different procedures that people shove in their mouth. Really high-end, literally cutting-edge stuff. Well, we got to dive into their business and understand what's really important to these guys. This idea of protecting intellectual property and some of the really cool stuff. So the MSP world is full of these new technologies, but it's also rich with these, many, many different types of businesses to work with. So I'm definitely in favor of the MSP community. If you can handle the stress, and if you aren't
I like everybody
absolutely
knows that Skip has no hair.
has no hair, and my beard went gray a long time ago. But if you can handle the stress, and if you're not trying to make that top dollar or build out that massive retirement fund, the MSP world is very attractive. I think it has a lot to offer.
Well, I think in the corporate world there's a lot of attraction to the corporate world too, like high levels of training, free
Yes.
time,
Oh, yes. Really
and
good
being
training.
able to learn and deep dive into technologies, being able to design something very beautiful and that is 100% like interoperable. And you can do some amazing things when you can dedicate your time to building a system over
Mhm.
years. And don't get me wrong, like it's just a different style. So if you like the Wild West, like being thrown into a problem and a pit of despair, you go to MSP, but you're going to come out a stronger, smarter person.
I think
But you're going
so.
to be a
Yep.
mile wide. Now,
Yep.
if you want to be a mile deep, go to the corporate world where you're going to work
Hmm.
on one technology. Now, here's the problem that I want to bring up with corporate. I know I complain about corporate all the time. It does have its family kind of feel, but the problem with being in those silos, and I do have a lot to say on silos,
Yes, they're
is
dangerous.
that you get good at Cisco, for instance, and then over time you get really good at Cisco,
Hmm.
and then you become a savant almost. So you can do the job of two
Yep.
or three people. And because you know this really well. Now, this is a risk to the corporation because if you ever decide to burn out, if you decide that you want to go out and
Decide to
start your
burn
own
out.
business someday,
Yep.
that corporation has lost a massive asset.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
lost like this person can do three jobs. I think I talked about this in one of our last podcasts. Was that when I got replaced in one of my first corporate jobs, they replaced me with three people, and that costs a lot of money. Now, in the corporate world, there's a lot to be said about that person who has that quadrant four maturity and how much you need to pay them. They need to be overpaid
Hmm.
because when
Yep.
they leave, it costs you so much money.
Yeah. It does.
Um, and that silo creates this dependency. Whether you have two of these people or not doesn't matter. You still have this one person who is very, very good at what they do and very good at understanding your systems. And so you've got to keep them very happy to
Yep.
keep them around. Alternatively, you can just be a jerk to them and rely on high turnover to keep the blood fresh and to keep your systems less dependent on people. That's your management style. Okay, have fun with
Yep.
that. But in the corporate world, you do have this entrenchment where these people are really good at what they do. And if they ever go away, now we got to find somebody to replace them. And sometimes they have processes in place that are really hard to replicate because it was their way of doing things and they did them for 10 years
Yep.
straight.
Yep.
And now they've retired, they moved on to another job, they decided to stay at home, whatever their reason. Now you've got to find someone to replace it, which is why we get these weird job requests out there.
Yeah.
And because somebody hasn't done a roles and responsibilities chart
Oh
forever,
yeah. Yeah.
that
That's
you end up with these. And I looked at them, I remember back probably about 2010-ish, when I looked at jobs, I would see these postings for must be able to work with Cisco, write Perl scripts, and I
yeah.
don't know, have a expertise in leather working. It would
Yeah.
be something
It's
like
something
that.
strange
It'd be something weird, like who is this person? And
because they're
essentially, they
trying.
go, "Hey, what did Alice do before she left?" And they wrote down a list of all the
Yes,
things she did.
they're trying to replicate a person and not a role.
So you end
Yes.
up with this what we call unicorns.
Uh-huh.
And you cannot hire a unicorn. You
No.
can't. They
No,
don't
they're
exist. You had one, they left you.
yeah. Well,
Deal
even
with
if
it.
you do hire a unicorn, it's not going to be the same
Not the
unicorn as
same
you had
unicorn.
before.
This is
So,
Fluttershy.
yes.
This is not Twilight Sparkle.
All right, you tell who has little girls at home. All right.
So that's the way corporate world is. Now, I
Yeah.
feel like in the MSP world, it's a lot more stable. It's like, what do you need? We need a Microsoft admin who is familiar with Azure. Anything else? No, that's about it. If you have anything extra, that's great.
It's great. Yeah. But
you
yeah,
know they're very clear on the role they need to fill because they're fulfilling a contract and they've had these contracts forever, or they're trying to break into an area. Hey, we need a CISSP who is very familiar with NIST security models because we're trying to get into government work. Or PCI. It's easy. But in a corporate world, you're like, okay, well, Alice used to do all these things. Now we need to hire somebody just like her so that somebody
yeah.
can behave like her. And this poor SOB comes in and fills this chair,
Right.
and they're
And
good at their
it's
job.
yeah.
And
He's
they
not
end up
Alice.
being thrown under
And
the bus because they
yep.
can't replace Alice. They're not Alice. Like, well, Alice used to do this. I'm like, no, you can't do that. I watched this happen to one of my employees once. I'm like, you guys cannot have the same expectations for them as the previous guy.
Yeah. Well, let me flip a little bit here. So I've talked about, my affinity for the MSP culture, but there is an attractive element to that corporate expert. So we worked with a guy. His name was Sean. I don't know if anybody listening might know who Sean is, but he was just an incredibly talented Cisco engineer, and so he worked on a lot of things. And as we moved along in the corporate world, he really kind of gravitated. He became our lead in the IP telephony area, and then before too long, he's just the expert, and he understands it all. And our environment ran really, really well because, by and large, because of Sean. And so, yes, he was in some aspects, maybe a single point of failure because there was nobody else that could do quite the job that he did. We could try and we could do parts and pieces, but he had this incredible knowledge. But with that incredible knowledge became a great asset. So, anything that went wrong, we could call Sean and he could fix it. Or anything that we needed to expand or, grow, he understood every little nuance of that. And so if that is something that, you want to be a little bit more of the unitasker type mindset, if
Unitasker.
Yeah, so that's the anti Alton Brown sort of deal. But if you want to really drive into one particular area, the corporate world is great. You talked about training earlier. I didn't realize it. Being young, I just kind of, I don't know, just took it the way it was. And I got used to having an annual 1 week long training session. And I just did it every year. I would ship myself off to, San Jose many times to go to, Cisco training deals. Global knowledge was the big thing back then, but it was always a very expensive and very intense training session that I just took for granted. And you flip over to the MSP world and you go, hey, when am I going to get my week's training? And they're going to look at you really funny. It's like, no, you're going to get a day training tomorrow afternoon on site. But that's also an appeal. That's an attractive element to the MSPs.
Yeah, and so I want to give some advice to MSPs out there because that's who's listened to this largely. Is that if you're running short on engineers and you want to attract those corporate guys and girls, get a foot in the door, hold an event and a free lunch or something.
Yep.
Where you're going to talk Cisco or something like that and get them in. Because I tell you what, as a corporate guy, I loved those.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Oh, there's a training. There's an event that's happening over at Laszlo's downtown. I can go to the lunch and learn there. Yeah. Host a lunch and learn and target it towards corporate engineers and have it on a specific, bring in one of your favorite vendors.
Yes.
I used to talk about that all the time. Do a lunch and learn, but target it at engineers. So if you're hurting for employees right now, target a lunch and learn at engineers. Like, say you're going to have one of your favorite Cisco guys come in and talk about the brand new Nexus core things that you may never deploy, but they're a corporate device. And you're going to attract all these engineers to come in and talk about this cool thing. Now, and do some giveaways. Wow them.
Oh, yes.
Make
them
giveaways are always impressed.
Yes. Now, when you do these lunch learns, it can't be all fluff. So it's got to be like the nerdy version of a jewelry show or something.
Yes.
Right? You've got to have enough detail that you're going to look at. Someone's going to really look at it and go, ooh, that's cool. I can make a connection here with that, and I could open up this port. You're going to have to spark some ideas in those guys. But yes, you can definitely attract some people that they're it's the sparkle. It's the wow factor.
Having that regular lunch and learn, because as a corporate employee, I have these weird rules around what I can accept as gifts and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if I do it as a private citizen, I can come in and, oh my gosh, they gave away some iPads during this. They gave a test lab away where I could play in Cisco.
Oh
You
yeah, the
know,
lab
you
environment.
do
Yeah.
these things and you wow the engineers, and eventually you'd be like, "Hey, if you ever want to come work, we have openings."
Hmm.
You know, do a quick little pitch at the end and pique the interest of those engineers, because some of them are burned out and they don't know they have a choice.
They are.
They're
They
very
are. Yeah.
comfortable in their little velvet lined rut, is what we call it internally.
Hmm.
You're in this velvet lined rut and you're comfortable, but you keep looking over there thinking, maybe there's something more. Maybe I could have a little bit more freedom in my day. Maybe I could
Yeah.
work somewhere where I don't have to respond to the Bobs every day. And
Yeah.
that is enticing to corporate people. Now, some of them, you'll never get them out of their velvet lined rut because they found that rut and they've made their nest there.
Yeah.
They're
Yep.
going
And
to
that's okay.
die in that
That's
rut.
okay.
And
Yep.
there's nothing you can do about it. That's okay. That's their life choice. But there are plenty of engineers who want to get out there and do interesting things. They got into
Hmm.
engineering because they liked solving problems, and the corporate environment was just where they ended up.
Yeah.
And you want
So
to poach people who are happy in their jobs because they make fantastic employees.
yes. Yes. Oh yeah. That yeah. Getting the happy employees is always better. So let me, as we close up here, let me kind of make a final call out to MSPs and attracting talent, and encourage you to understand what your culture is. Now, every MSP is different. That's the cool part about it. For many years, and most definitely in the last few years, and what we do now, I get to work with a lot of MSPs, and I still firmly believe there is a very, very broad range of cultures out there. Uh, but just because your culture is different doesn't mean it's bad. And I'm not saying that at all. So understand your culture. If there's things you need to change in it, change that. But I guess highlight your culture, promote it, advertise it. It is a selling point, and you may be trying to hire people who would have to come to you for less money. I can speak from personal experience, and I can say yes, people will leave high-paying jobs to come to a lower-paying job if they're more satisfied at work.
And that culture that you pick in the MSP, like what is it that makes your MSP shine as a place of choice,
Mhm.
as an employer of choice? People choose to work for you. And so, like, again, having those lunch and learns, having the perks that say, hey, look, maybe you want to take Thursday off. We have an unlimited vacation time. As long as
Yeah.
you're completing client tickets,
Mhm.
we don't care. You make us money, you can have ultimate freedom.
Yes. Yeah.
That's an MSP.
It
But
is. Yes.
if with a corporate environment, oh, here, sign all these paperwork. Here's exactly what you can do, when you can do it, where you can do it, because we don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
Whereas an
What?
MSP is like, oh, can you make us money?
Yeah. And so I guess
If you're
so.
making
One,
us
one more
money,
thing here. Now you got
what
me
what,
thinking.
what can we give you?
Yeah.
And so you might have like a little bit of a decline in salary. And I will say personally, I have chosen the job that was less
Mm.
money. But I've
Yeah.
also chosen the job that had more money.
Yeah.
And
I've
the
done that
perks are pretty
too.
fun when
Yeah.
you have a place where you can brag about, oh yeah, they give us a free laptop for home use, or they gave me a gaming PC as my work computer.
Yeah.
And these little
That's it.
stupid things that you can't do in the corporate environment because it's not fair.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and whereas an
That's
MSP is
it.
like,
That's it.
it's not about fair, it's about how can we make more money.
Yeah. Well,
And
so
so
I got to put in one final. So I said I was done, but let me do the preacher thing and close for the third time. Um, I encouraged MSPs out there to advertise your culture, but let me give you a cautionary note as well. Don't try to run your MSP as a corporation. All right, you will break a lot of things if you
it
try to
won't work.
run a corporate. So, yep,
If you get big enough, potentially, but you
potential. Yeah,
still
yes.
you have to be, you're talking like 1,000 employees there.
You need to understand what you're going to break when you
I do
make that
think there's a
transition.
little bit of arrogance with small businesses sometimes, where they think they're bigger than they are. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm 500
Yeah.
employees. No, no, you're still a small business. You are
Hmm.
still legally termed a small business.
Yeah.
You don't get to be a medium business till you like break like 1,500 or something like that.
Yeah. It's a
Large
lot.
businesses are 10,000.
Mhm.
So understand, when you're trying to replicate a COBIT or a ITIL strategy inside your little 100 person MSP because
Ooh,
you feel big,
Yeah.
you're going to crush your employees. Those
Yeah.
strategies are meant for massive ships that have tens of thousands of components working together.
Hmm.
You don't need that.
Yep.
You are agile. You are a warship. You are a small, agile little thing shooting around, and you're able to destroy people. But you start acting like a big old freight carrier, it's
Yep.
not gonna work
Yep.
because that's not how you're designed. That's what you not what you do. So
Yeah.
know your culture.
Embrace your strengths.
Embrace the strength, embrace that iterative process. Or are you a MSP that loves the boutique style where you're focused on doctor's offices, or are you a larger MSP focused on a variety of people and a variety of challenges in corporations? Figure out who you are. But if you're a corporate culture, if you're sitting there, figure out what you are doing and how those silos are benefiting you, as well as how to keep your employees interested with new projects and new ideas,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Get that going.
keeping them challenged so that they feel like they're growing and they feel valued and feel appreciated.
There you
Yeah,
go.
MSPs versus corporate, it's a tough one. I love the MSP culture. I love the Wild West riding into the sunset after a job well done.
Absolutely.
I think that is
Absolutely.
a fantastic thing. I'm excited for MSPs to transition to a new future where they're becoming digital advisors, where they're talking
Mhm.
more about strategy and how to grow their clients rather than just fixing their computers.
Yeah. Technology business consultants. That's my term of the month. But I think that's the path that MSPs are on, and I'm excited for that future.
Well, I should be back from my vacation by the time this episode airs, so
Oh,
hopefully
okay.
we'll have a couple more under the hood, and I can fill people in on how things went. But until then, thank you for attending, and we'll see everyone next week.
See you.